Once upon a time, there was a king who withdrew into his palace and became a mystery to his subjects. One day disaster struck, as it always seems to do, and his city burst into unquenchable flames, blooming like a fiery red rose, with the royal palace untouched and beautiful at its heart. The king opened his palace to the homeless and despairing and worked to rebuild the city. But a terrible thought like a cankerworm ate its way into the hearts of the people, and this is all they ever remembered him hereafter. He sang and played his lyre while we burned. Princess of my heart, Mythos greeted her, as he did every morning, but the smile on his face was distracted, his amber eyes far away. Perhaps it is time to return to Gold Crown Town. Rue, already seated at the elite table at the center of the light-filled breakfast room, set down the crystal flute she had just brought to her lips, the scarlet juice in it trembling. Her eyes sparkled suddenly, and a soft smile made her lips curve upward. He was already truly her prince. He had seen the wish in her heart. He had seen the desires she had not dared voice, lest he think her unhappy here in his kingdom, and had granted it. Her love had almost destroyed him, twisted him beyond recognition, yet he still saved her, still chosen to love her. She owed him every happiness, every joy. But preoccupied, Mythos did not see the joy in her smile, and instead continued as if he did not notice she had opened her mouth to speak. My dreams are troubled, he said, not wanting to worry her, determined to protect her as he had failed to do so before, by naming the raven. By darkness, I am concerned about the town. He did not see the smile falter on her lips, the sparkle dim in her eyes. No, he did not see, and she could not tell him. Rue felt as if her own vicious taunts to Princess Tutu had come back to haunt her. She could not speak, for if she did, Rue feared, her love might vanish in a flash of light, and would not risk that for anything, even her own happiness. So lost was she in her own misery, she could not make sense of his words. Duck was miserable because Fakir was, even though he seemed entirely unaware of and completely baffled by his own emotions. There was always a touch of stunned pain in his eyes, as if he himself could not believe that he should feel hurt, as if he could not figure out why the feeling even existed at all. The emotion stayed trapped in the depths of his almost now gray eyes, eyes that crackled like ice with coldness, but Duck could always see it there. Ever since the injured sparrow, she could not help but noticing all the little cruelties in his behavior. Cruelty by omission, really. Where once Fakir would have helped, he watched with almost amused indifference. She was certain it was because his heart was incomplete. What else could it be? And yet, when she had tried once more to bring up the matter of his broken heart, he had silenced her with the same scathing look, insisting she keep her half of the pendant and never raise the subject again. Since then, he had taken to actively avoiding all the places he knew he used to frequent, as if the sight of her too would pain him. She thought at first that it was just her he had been avoiding, but one day, as she meandered aimlessly through the streets of Gold Crown Town, she found herself in front of Charon's shop, and learned otherwise. It was an unnerving feeling of having lived this exact moment before, for there Charon was, head bent over the hilt of an antique dagger he was trying to clean. He was focused entirely on the piece in his hands, and did not see her watching him. He looked troubled as he worked. A warm, red spark flared in the glass, startling Duck from her thoughts before she realized it. That it was only the broken heart pendant she wore, reflecting in the glass of the window. Perhaps it was some trick of the sunlight, but in that moment the soul seemed to glow an intense, distressed red, as if pleading with her to enter. Somehow, before she quite knew what she was doing, Duck pushed open the door, the little shop bell chiming, and Charon was looking up at her as she asked, in her usual bumbling, scattered way, about Fakir. Is Fakir here? I've looked for him everywhere, but I can't find him. Seeing Charon's puzzled expression, she felt a tear strike her heart, wondering if she still did not remember his son. Was Fakir's story still overriding Charon's memory? She hoped fervently he simply didn't remember her, and that was the cause of his confusion. That it was nothing more sinister than that. She explained in a hesitating voice, I'm a friend of his from school. That boy, Charon sighed, Duck breathed out heavily in her relief, but he continued, worry etched in his face. He hasn't been around here in days. Duck wondered if this too was the result of her prodding Fakir about the pendant, if he was even avoiding his house now in order to avoid her. As he stared at Charon's careworn face set in the lines of confusion and regret, and determined she would set things right. She felt the pendant warm against her skin, the sharp, broken edges brushing against her skin gently, as if encouraging her. This was how things had ended with her scouring Gold Crown Fine Arts Academy, till she found Fakir at last in one of the more obscure and shoddy practice rooms, performing torture tour in l'air, his body twisting with all the emotional turmoil he seemed incapable of expressing or even understanding anymore. He glared at her, but she had grabbed his hand fiercely and tugged it too really. He had no choice but to follow her, lose the fingers on that hand to her persistence. She had huffed and puffed and pushed and jostled and somehow gotten down to Charon's shop, but the entire way there, Fakir's eyes did not thaw the slightest, despite her antics. They did not even burned with rage. No, it was still that same icy indifference. But Duck was not one to give up so easily. The little shop bell rung again, although this time there was a decidedly discordant tone in its tinkle as Duck pushed again, opened the door with one hand, and dragged her resistant Fakir with the other. Tinkle. Sorry. Jerry looked up at the sound and marveled at this girl he did not know. So many different questions darted to his mind. Thus, who was the strange, red-headed girl who had wrought a miracle in behalf of ours? How did she know Fakir? How had she brought him here when Charon himself could hardly convince the boy to talk to him alone come to the shop? Charon wondered, as he seemed to do so constantly of late, just what had happened to his son. Somehow, in a matter of days, Fakir had turned into another person entirely, one who seemed carved from a block of ice. Duck could see the mix of emotions flitting through Charon's eyes as he went to Fakir. Disappointment, relief, frustration, a slow anger, but most of all she saw hope. She wondered at the silence in the room, thick and palpable, with so many things unsaid. There were so many unspoken words and emotions between them, and yet both still stood silent. Finally she realized that she was the reason for that silence. She had no place in an intimate family scene. For all intents and purposes, she was an outsider. With the twinge of sadness she refused to let herself feel, Duck blurted out, I'm so silly. How can you have a fireside moment with me here? I'll just let myself out. The bell jingled one more time as the door closed behind her, and she stopped and leaned against its hard, wooden surface for a moment, and wondered at this pain she felt. She never before had been jealous that Fakir had a family, and even now she realized the turmoil she felt wasn't so much as jealousy as loneliness. A sadness came to her to realize that she could not part in this aspect of Fakir's life. There would always be something behind her reach. Determined to put such bleak thoughts behind her, Duck convinced herself to walk back to the girls' dorm without looking back. More than once. Twice. Fakir. Charon reproached his son in a voice filled with frustration and disappointment. What's happened to you? You stay out all hours. You never come home. But his own anger was hardly important right now, so Charon curbed the rest of the scolding words with his tongue, instead reached out with a rough, calloused hand, rested on Fakir's shoulder comfortably. Tell me what's worrying you so. Idly, Fakir noted that the man seemed to have lost all knowledge of Fakir's brief disappearance from the world. Duck had mentioned in her perpetual chatter that existence had been erased from the world as he laid heartless in the catacombs beneath Gold Crown Town. But now it seemed that all had changed, having been forced past its natural conclusion by Duck's actions. Was the story trying to adapt itself to their actions in some way? He wondered. The question did not feel all that pressing, however, and he did dismiss it indifferently. The memory of his annihilation, it seemed, could not be easily erased, as easily overridden as the memory of his existence. Realization awakened something that had been sleeping uneasily within Fakir. He shrugged out the hand and stared at the man as if he did not know him, or care to. What are my worries to you? Sean could not befriend the appalled anger tone of his voice at that. I'm your father. And what would I want with a worthless old man who could do nothing but tell stories? At those words, Charon recoiled as if Fakir struck him. The ice within Fakir burned even colder as the man's reaction reminded him when Charon had struck him for wanting his destiny, for wanting the power of the knight's sword. The talons of the spear dug deeper into Fakir, having already seen that flint on Charon's face. He thirsted for more. More misery, more pain, more despair. As if those words had unlocked the case within him, something terrible and clawing burst out from his chest. Fakir felt himself at the mercy of 1,000 needle-sharp raven beaks once more, felt himself being torn in two once more by the thing that emerged from his own heart. Fakir did not notice that he seemed to be clad as a ballet knight once more, in a doublet and tights so deeply blue, it's almost black as a cloak, as dark as the space between stars. He did, however, notice the sword-like knight had somehow found its way into his hands. And again, see folks, this is how you describe a clothing outfit. Nobody really reads out like, you seem to be wearing a blue shirt, blue pants, watch, and have glasses on. You describe it like this. You say ballet night. Okay, now I can see it. You describe the colors. You build up to it. Charon stared in horror at the gray eyes that shone as distantly and coldly as stars on dark winter night. Darkest night, Charon murmured in despair. Darkest night, Fakir heard, and nodded as if he heard his own name. And then, without hesitation, he plunged the sword into Charon's chest. The sword struck a hairline fissure in something beautiful and delicate, and broke like a hatching egg. From within, a rapacious calling craven called its way out. The malicious laughing bird flew out from Charon's heart. The darkest night looked on as the raven came to perch in Charon's eyes.